What up, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Coded Design, where I teach graphic design and coding. I am Matthew Msingati, the designer and developer. Today, we're going to discuss single responsibility. Single responsibility principle forms part of the solid principle. So, it's the first one. That S stands for single responsibility. What does single responsibility mean, or what it states? Single responsibility principle states that a class needs to have a single responsibility. This doesn't mean one task or one function or one code or one instruction, but it means if you look at your app and you look at your class, try to narrow down the functionality or the scope of that class. What is this class meant to do? If you've defined that, then make sure it does only that. That's what the single responsibility principle states. However, let's talk about principles in general, in real life, mathematics, in life in general, school, home, family. You will notice something that is very weird about principle, or we tend to undermine them. For instance, your mother might tell you something, a wise saying or a wise quotation. However, at first, when you are young, it's easier for you to ignore it, or you tend to ignore it until you get into that problem, and your mind will start to open and be like, this is what she meant, because now you are in the actual problem. I don't know why we tend to ignore principles like that. Maybe it might happen that life is designed in such a way that you don't live by someone else's rules, but you want to experience, you want to have your own experience, so that when you are teaching other people, you teach them from experience rather than from theory. Maybe that's the case, but back to the topic. I have read solid principle a couple of times and the single responsibility principle a couple of times, but it really didn't have that impact. It really didn't feel like it's something important in my coding. It doesn't help me that much. It helped me because I hear that you must adhere to the single responsibility, but to be honest, I really didn't feel like it carries much weight until I was developing this accounting system. So I want to take you through that discovery process on what happened in my coding, where I had to stop and be like, if this class had a single responsibility, I was not gonna be in this type of a problem. And to be honest with you, it took time for me to figure out what was the problem. Remember, I'm the only one who's developing the system. It's not like there's someone else who's gonna read through my code and they don't know what's going on. It's only me. But now I was trying to refactor my code to improve it, making it simple and apply good programming practice. And also I recently learned design patterns, so I was very interested on improving it so that it can be extensible. Now when I was refactoring, I got into a situation where I had some magic variables. What are magic variables? This is just a term where I'm referring to variables that are in your system. You can see that they have got the information, but you don't know where did you declare those variables, and also where did you assign the content in those variables. I call those variable magic variable until I realized that single responsibility principle is very, very important. So without wasting time, let's jump into Visual Studio Code so that I can take you through my code and then tell you what was the mistake that I did. Okay, when I was developing this system, I realized that I have to create my own some sort of a library, or at least a class that is going to help me to connect to a database. Whenever you create a web app that connects to database, obviously you must have some sort of instructions that connects to database, queries. You write a lot of queries. So I decided not to include those queries in my own logic. Let me create a class that is gonna make things easier for me, that is gonna be dedicated only for queries. I called that class Philantro as a library. I've created my own mini library called Philantro. Philantro here in this case PHP, it only helps me with connecting and also querying to the database. For instance, instead of always writing SQL instructions, this class helps me on those things. So when I'm using it, for instance, I will just call, let's say, a verify method, and then from then I will pass the username and the password. It will deal with all the technicalities. When I want to get all the information from a certain table, let's say the table is items, what I will do, let's say I will call a get method from that class, and then I will just pass the table name and also the scope. If I've put a star, meaning that selecting all, it will bring like all the rows as an associative array. Or if I said from item, I'm selecting an item code, it will give me that. So that was the idea behind creating a mini library for not necessarily only for this application, but for all other application. There was a point where I was tired of writing SQL statements. It was like tiring, and when you look at those SQL statements, you will see that there is some sort of a repetition here. Select all from item, select all from employee, select all from. So I started to feel like I'm repeating myself, hence I created the library. So in this library, I've got a class that helps me to deal with some sort of minor queries. When I mean minor queries, are those queries that you know you only perform them once in your application. For instance, when somebody is logging in, if I have got a class that helps me on verifying the password, I will do that once. When I'm logged in, that means I will never deal with that again, unless maybe in my app I will need to verify. But you'll find that I won't be using this more oftenly. So now what I've decided to do, I've decided to create a class called preliminary, meaning that it's just some functions that relates to the database, of course, because I'm in Philantro. But I'm not gonna use those most oftenly. For instance, let's just assume that I'm just gonna use the verify method of preliminary class when I'm logging in, and then I'm not gonna use it again. So Philantro makes use of a class called preliminary. The class has got a method verify to verify the password. So as you can see here, this is my class Philantro, and then it has got properties. One of the properties is preliminary as a class, and then this is a variable name. Let's also go to another preliminary. Here I'm instantiating that preliminary class here. Okay, let me open so that you see. So here I'm instantiating the preliminary class in the constructor, and then from there, the Philantro class will some sort of receive a request from my business logic, and then from then, based on that request, it will check if what is it that you are looking for. Do you want to verify the password? Do you want to get all the tables and so on? Do you want a list of tables? It also have all the list of tables in your database, so that if you want that list of tables, it can be readily available for you from Philantro. So it makes a lot of switch statement, as you can see here. So it makes a lot of switch statement. However, in this case, we want to verify the password. So let's say on case number 3, it will return this dot preliminary. Then inside the class preliminary, it will look for verify, and then the verify method will receive all the arguments, which means this is an array arguments, argument 0, argument 1, argument 2, and also a boolean value, true or false. However, I'm not gonna get into those details. Let's just assume that in these arguments 0, 1, 2, inside it, let's say the first argument there will be the password, inside the second argument there will be the username, inside the third argument there will be a table where we're gonna perform all the queries. So we've got Philantro, and Philantro make use of preliminary class, and the preliminary class make use of a verify method to verify the password. That's what this method is for. Okay, so now let's go to the preliminary class and go to the verify method. Okay, am I under classes? Yes, let me just type P. Yes. Now let's take a look at the preliminary class. Okay, let's take a look at the preliminary class. I'm not going to get into details on everything, but I'm just giving you an idea of what's going on. Now we are on the preliminary class. We've got a function verify. Okay, let me just read this comment. Column is an array of columns where we get the verification value, and verification is fine. And then we've got this function verify. It receives all those parameters, you see. So this one, the first parameter, it's an array of columns, the second one is a table, and the third one is a value, and then the fourth one, it's a boolean. Then the variable name here is password verify. Okay, now let's get into the problem that I've encountered that opened my eyes, that brought some sort of a light into my mind, a different way of thinking or of looking at single responsibility. At least by now you are supposed to at least understand that preliminary deals with minor queries or minor database queries, just like verifying password. However, this function verify, it's supposed to be dealing strictly with verifying the password only. But when I was developing this app, this is what I did. I'm just gonna go to the instructions to the code that deals with verifying the password. For instance, let's just look at this code. Also remember, even to me, it's been a while since I've been working on this project. I work on it, I will take a gap because maybe there's a small project that I've received, or I'm going somewhere, maybe it's a holiday or it's December, so I have to go back home and do some other things. So even for me, it's been a while since I visited this code, so I don't really know a lot about it, and at the same time I am busy refactoring it, so I'm busy changing it. So the state of the code, it's not stable. So but however, it's important to write your code using the solid principle and dry principle, and making sure that your code, it's easier to read and maintain, it's traceable. You don't have a situation where when you are trying to trace what's going on in your code and find out that here it's where you stop, you can't tell where is this variable coming from, what is this function doing. That's the wrong way, the incorrect way of going about it. So now here I am supposed to verify if the value at 1 is equal to the value at this array. Since this is a refactored version, as you can see that it returns a boolean value. This is a refactored version, a much cleaner one. This is the mistake that I did before. When the password was true, here I'm under the assumption that the value at this array is the password. I'm checking it, does it match. This is what I did. When the password was true, I was very lazy. What I did, I have assigned db values to super globals, not necessarily super global, but to global, to session variables. Okay, what do I mean by that? Obviously, when somebody logs in, they put in their login details, the name and the password. So when the verification is true, when I am convinced as a developer that okay, this is the right user and this is the correct user password, what I will do, I will, this is outside the scope of the verify function. Now the verify function doesn't have a single responsibility. What I will do, I will go to the users table and query all the information about that user, and I will take that information and assign it under session variables. So I will assign all that under session variables, assign all that information, the username, the password, and the what and all the access level for that person, so that when I'm loading loading the welcome screen of the application, I could have those details here. So this test, it's a username, but where do I get this username on my UI, on my front end? I used to get that from the session variable that I have assigned here. So in the session variable, a session variable is it's a variable that is available globally in the entire session or in the entire application. You can just use it whenever you want. So it was my own method of transferring data from, let's say, one page or one script to another. So what I did, if the password is true, I will query all the information for that user so that it can be available on the user interface. For instance, when I want to type, let's say, the username and the surname on a quotation, so that I can just pull those from my user interface. However, now the problem was, when I was refactoring, I didn't know where am I getting this test from. I didn't know, because it was after some time. I think it was after a month. Now I'm refactoring, trying to make sure that my code is clean and readable and also extensible. Now when I was looking at my code, first of all, I didn't think that this function verify can also query information from the database so that it can be readily available for the front end. It didn't occur to me like that. But before I did that, I did it. But now after a month or 2 months, I didn't know if I can do that. So meaning that now these session variables were some sort of magic variables in a way, because when I'm looking on the front end, I can see that I am taking this information from the session variables that are available globally. But number one, I don't know where am I assigning them, where am I initializing them. And it happened that I was initializing them here. Once I have verified that this is the right user, what I will do, I will query all the information for that user, so that when I'm loading my landing page, I can populate that information here. For instance, this username and all other details that I always pull from this interface when I'm maybe generating an invoice or generating a code or whatever. Even when I'm generating, let's say, an employee payslip, I will make use of those details instead of querying from the database all the time. What was the problem? Now I have spent time trying to understand, where do I get this variable name? What was the problem? What was the principle that I have broken? Is the single responsibility principle. This function verify was doing things outside the scope of verifying. For that matter, even the class preliminary, at some point it's not clear. You cannot tell, like, from the class and say that maybe the function of that class might be this. You cannot really tell. And then also, when you get into the function verify, it's doing some things which are outside its scope. So now when I'm coming back as a fresh person, it's been some time, I've been away, I'm coming back, I want to refactor. Now I have to think, where did I assign those things? After some time, I realized that, oh, this is what I did. I have assigned those things somewhere here, of which it was the wrong thing to do. Then it dawned to me that it's very important that, number one, a class or a function must perform one task, or at least it must have a single responsibility. It must not be responsible for a lot of things. How is that gonna help you? Number one, it's gonna help you on the problem that I've encountered of not knowing where were you performing a certain task, because it's buried or hidden or is shoved under a method that doesn't really is responsible for that task. So it's gonna help you on debugging, I say, or tracing your code to fix or solve, to fix some errors. However, it can help you also on code reusability. Remember, you can take a class from this application to another application. You can take a function from this application to another application. It must be like a plug and play thing, like a USB. Whenever you plug a USB into your computer or into your laptop, it doesn't ask you for a driver. But however, when you've got an external camera or something else, a device or a printer, before you use it on any computer, you must install the drivers, the instructions that tell the computer on how to use that particular printer or brand of a printer. So with the USB, you just plug it and it works. So it's plug and play. Functions and classes are supposed to be like that. When you want to use them somewhere else, you are supposed to plug and play them. Let's look at my mini library Philantro. This library Philantro, yes, it works, it solves the problem, but however, if I'm going to use it on a different application as it was before, because before, when it was verifying the password, it was also like assigning some session variables, assigning the details of the user, all the user details into session variable. It might happen the new application that I'm busy with doesn't really need that. Then it becomes a problem. Now my library, it's not usable, or it will break when I'm taking it to a different application. So code reusability, it becomes a problem when your classes are performing multiple tasks, more especially which are outside the scope of the purpose or the intention of a class. Lastly, let's look at the human body. As you can see that we've got the brain that performs certain instructions. It's soft, it's covered, it's protected by a skull. Make sure that it's not easy to be reached or damaged. However, we've got your hands and feet. Things are always on the ground. we use hands for a lot of things, for hard work. But however, the point here is they've got a single responsibility. A hand is a hand and it remains a hand. You haven't seen a case whereby a hand wants to act like an ear at some point, because that will be confusing. So I think we can also think that way as developers, or at least when you want to get single responsibility principle around your head, that it's so important, it will save your life in a way. Because when I was looking at my codes, after some time it was difficult for me to understand what am I was trying to do, or where did I assign these variables. So just like any other principle, when you hear about this principle, it's not easy for you to instantly get the essence and apply it. Or maybe you might apply it on somebody else's problem or context, but remember, you are an individual, you need to have your own experiences. So by practicing and doing your own code and encountering these problems, maybe you might get some mind-opening instances, the one that will drill the single responsibility principle into your own mind. Otherwise, for me, Matthew Msingati, the designer and developer, if you feel like this video added value to your overall understanding of the single responsibility principle, please share the video or subscribe for future videos. Otherwise, for me, I'm out. Thank you.